What happens when a beloved television host crosses the line with one of Britain's most charming presenters? In just 49 seconds, Lorraine Kelly turned from daytime darling to public enemy number one after an outrageous comment that shocked everyone watching. This is the story of how one moment destroyed everything. The studio lights were bright that morning. Graham Norton sat in the guest chair, his usual smile plastered across his face. He was there to talk about his latest book, a memoir filled with heartwarming stories from his decades in television. The audience clapped as Lorraine Kelly introduced him, her voice dripping with that familiar Scottish warmth she was known for. "Graham Norton, everyone," Lorraine announced, gesturing toward her guest. "So lovely to have you here. Your book is absolutely wonderful. I've been reading it all week." Graham leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "Thank you so much, Lorraine. It's been such a joy to write. Really, it's been like therapy, going through all these memories." The conversation flowed easily at first. They chatted about his childhood in Ireland, his early days in comedy, the struggles of breaking into television. Graham was his usual charming self-deprecating and funny, making the audience laugh with every anecdote. Lorraine nodded along, smiling, asking all the right questions. But then something shifted. Lorraine's tone changed. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable. She leaned back in her chair, her smile tightening just a fraction. "You know, Graham," she said, her voice taking on an edge, "I've always wondered something about you." Graham raised an eyebrow, still smiling, but clearly caught off guard. "Oh? What's that?" Lorraine tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Well, it's just that you've had this career, this long, successful career, and yet you've never really done anything groundbreaking, have you?" The studio went quiet. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Graham's smile faltered, confusion flickering across his face. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" Lorraine shrugged, her tone casual, almost dismissive. "I mean, you've had your chat show for years, yes, but it's always the same thing, isn't it? Celebrities come on, you make them giggle, they tell a funny story, and that's it. Where's the substance? Where's the real journalism?" Graham blinked, clearly stunned. "Lorraine, I don't think that's entirely fair. My show is entertainment. It's meant to be fun, lighthearted. People enjoy it." Lorraine waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, I know people enjoy it. But let's be honest, Graham. It's fluff. It's not changing anyone's life. It's not making a difference." The other panelists on the show, sitting off to the side, exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of them, a young woman named Sarah, cleared her throat nervously. "Lorraine, I think." Lorraine cut her off with a sharp look. "I'm talking to Graham, Sarah." Sarah shrank back, her cheeks flushing. Graham, meanwhile, was struggling to keep his composure. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles turning white. "Lorraine, I came here to talk about my book. I didn't come here to be attacked." Lorraine laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "Attacked? Oh, please, I'm just being honest. Someone needs to say it. And you've coasted for years on charm and wit, but what have you actually contributed? What's your legacy going to be?" Graham's face was turning red now, a mixture of anger and humiliation. "My legacy? My legacy is making people happy. My legacy is giving them an escape from their problems for an hour. That's not nothing, Lorraine." Lorraine scoffed. "An escape. How noble. Meanwhile, the rest of us are out here doing real work, covering real issues, making a real impact." Another panelist, an older man named David, tried to intervene. "Lorraine, I think you're being a bit harsh here. Graham's show is beloved by millions. That's not something to dismiss." Lorraine turned on him, her eyes flashing. "David, with all due respect, no one asked for your opinion. This is my show, and I'll run it how I see fit." David held up his hands in surrender, clearly not wanting to escalate things further. The tension in the studio was unbearable now. The audience sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were witnessing. This was supposed to be a feel-good morning show, a place where people came to relax and enjoy themselves. Instead, it had turned into a battlefield. Graham took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Lorraine, I don't know what's going on with you today, but this is completely uncalled for. I've done nothing to deserve this." Lorraine leaned forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "You've done nothing, period. That's the point. You're just a placeholder, Graham. A warm body filling a time slot. Anyone could do what you do." Graham stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This was Lorraine Kelly, someone he'd considered a colleague, maybe even a friend. And now she was tearing him apart on live television. "You know what?" Graham said finally, his voice shaking. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this. I thought I was coming on a show with a professional, but clearly I was wrong." Lorraine's eyes widened in mock surprise. "Oh, are you leaving? How dramatic. Running away when things get a little uncomfortable?" Graham stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm not running away. I'm refusing to participate in whatever this is. You've crossed a line, Lorraine. A big one." Lorraine laughed again, that same cold, mocking laugh. "Oh, please, you're so sensitive. Can't take a little criticism? Maybe that's why you've never done anything important. You're too fragile." Sarah, the young panelist, spoke up again, her voice trembling. "Lorraine, this is really not okay. You're being cruel." Lorraine whipped her head around to face Sarah. "Cruel? I'm being honest. If you can't handle honesty, maybe you're in the wrong business too." Graham was already unclipping his microphone, his hands shaking with rage. "You want honesty, Lorraine? Here's some honesty for you. You're a bully. You've always been a bully. You hide it behind that sweet smile and that cheerful voice, but underneath, you're mean-spirited and petty." Lorraine's smile vanished. Her face hardened, her eyes turning icy. "How dare you? How dare you come onto my show and insult me like that?" Graham threw his microphone onto the chair. "I'm insulting you? You've spent the last 10 minutes tearing me down for no reason. You started this, Lorraine, not me." Lorraine stood up too, her fists clenched at her sides. "Get out. Get out of my studio right now." Graham didn't need to be told twice. He turned on his heel and started walking toward the exit. But Lorraine wasn't done. She couldn't let him have the last word. "You'll regret this, Graham," she called after him, her voice echoing through the studio. "Walking out on me like this. No one walks out on me." Graham stopped in his tracks. He turned around slowly, his face a mask of controlled fury. "No, Lorraine. You're the one who's going to regret this. Because everyone watching just saw the real you. And it's not pretty." With that, he walked off the set, leaving Lorraine standing there, her chest heaving with anger. The audience sat in stunned silence, too shocked to even applaud or react. The camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. The producers were scrambling in the control room, trying to figure out what to do. David, the older panelist, tried to salvage the situation. "Well, that was certainly unexpected. Maybe we should, take a break?" Lorraine ignored him. She was staring at the door Graham had just walked through, her jaw clenched tight. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. The whole studio felt like it was holding its breath. But let's rewind. Let's go back to the beginning to understand how this all started. Graham had arrived at the studio that morning in high spirits. His book was doing well. The reviews were glowing, and he was excited to talk about it. He'd always liked Lorraine, or at least he thought he had. They'd crossed paths at industry events over the years, always exchanging pleasantries, always friendly. When he walked into the green room, Lorraine was already there, sipping a cup of tea. She looked up as he entered, and for a moment, Graham thought he saw something flash in her eyes. Something cold. But then she smiled, and he dismissed it. "Graham, darling," she said, standing up to give him a quick hug. "So good to see you. How are you?" "I'm great, Lorraine. Really great. Thanks for having me on." She nodded, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course. Wouldn't miss it. Your book is quite the talk of the town." There was something off about the way she said it, something that made Graham's stomach twist slightly, but he pushed the feeling aside. But he was probably just nervous. Interviews always made him a little jittery, no matter how many he'd done. A production assistant poked her head into the green room. 5 minutes, everyone." Lorraine set down her tea and smoothed her dress. "Right then, let's give them a good show, shall we?" Graham followed her out of the green room and onto the set. The studio audience clapped and cheered as they took their seats. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. But it wasn't. As the interview began, Lorraine's questions were pointed from the start. She asked about his book, yes, but there was an undertone to everything she said. A sharpness that Graham couldn't quite put his finger on. "So, Graham," she said, flipping through the pages of his book, "you talk a lot about your struggles early on. But things have been pretty easy for you for a while now, haven't they?" Graham frowned slightly. "Easy? I don't know if I'd say that. I still work very hard." Lorraine raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm sure you do. But let's be real. It's not like you're out there breaking your back. You sit in a chair. You chat with celebrities. You crack a few jokes. It's hardly the most demanding job in the world." Graham's smile tightened. "It's more than that, Lorraine. There's a lot of preparation, a lot of research. I want my guests to feel comfortable, to open up. That takes effort." Lorraine shrugged. "If you say so. I just think, some of us have to work a bit harder to stay relevant." The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the friendly banter they were used to. This felt off. Graham tried to laugh it off. "Well, I suppose I'm lucky then, but I don't take it for granted. I know how fortunate I am." Lorraine leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Do you, though? Because sometimes it seems like you do. Like you think you're untouchable." Graham blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" And that's when it started. That's when Lorraine really went for the jugular. She questioned his talent, his work ethic, his entire career. She picked apart everything he'd built, piece by piece, with a smile on her face. The panelists tried to step in, tried to defend him, but Lorraine shut them down every time. She was relentless, unstoppable. It was like she'd been waiting for this moment, saving up all her venom for this exact interview. Graham, for his part, tried to stay calm. He tried to respond with grace, to take the high road. But there's only so much a person can take before they snap. Lorraine," he said, his voice tight, "I came here to have a conversation, not a confrontation. If you have a problem with me, maybe we should talk about it off camera." Lorraine's eyes gleamed. "Oh, I don't have a problem with you, Graham. I'm just asking questions. Isn't that what journalists do?" "These aren't questions," Graham shot back. "These are attacks, and I don't understand why." Lorraine tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Attacks? I'm just being honest. Maybe you're not used to that. Maybe everyone's been too nice to you for too long." Sarah, the young panelist, couldn't take it anymore. "Lorraine, please. This is too much. You're embarrassing all of us." Lorraine turned on her, her voice icy. "Embarrassing you? Sarah, if you don't like how I run my show, you're welcome to leave." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed silent. David, the older panelist, put a hand on her shoulder, trying to comfort her. But he didn't say anything either. They were all too afraid of Lorraine's wrath. Graham watched this exchange, his heart sinking. This wasn't just about him anymore. Lorraine was terrorizing everyone around her, using her power to silence anyone who dared to speak up. "You know what, Lorraine?" Graham said, his voice steady now. "I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because this cruelty, this need to tear people down, it's going to catch up with you. And when it does, you're going to be very lonely." Lorraine's face flushed red. "How dare you psychoanalyze me? You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Graham replied. "I know that you're insecure. I know that you're threatened by people who are happy, who are successful, who don't need to put others down to feel good about themselves." Lorraine slammed her hand on the armrest of her chair. "That's it. That's enough. Get off my set. Get out. Now." Graham stood up, his head held high. "Gladly." As he walked toward the exit, Lorraine couldn't help herself. She had to get one last jab in. "You're making a huge mistake, Graham. Walking away from this. People will remember this. They'll remember that you couldn't handle the heat." Graham paused at the door, turning back one last time. "No, Lorraine. They'll remember that you were cruel to a guest for no reason. They'll remember that you abused your power. And they'll remember that I had the dignity to walk away." The studio was silent. Even the crew had stopped moving, frozen in place by the intensity of the moment. Graham's words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Lorraine's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in the entire interview, she was speechless. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly. She'd pushed too far, and she knew it. Graham didn't wait for a response. He walked out, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The sound seemed to echo through the studio, a final punctuation mark on the disaster that had just unfolded. Back on the set, Lorraine stood frozen, her eyes wide. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of her humiliation. The audience didn't know what to do. Should they clap? Should they boo? Should they just sit there in awkward silence? David finally broke the silence. "Well, I think we've all learned something today about, the importance of, treating people with respect. It was a weak attempt at salvaging the show, but it was better than nothing." Sarah nodded along, still looking like she might cry. Lorraine, meanwhile, slowly sank back into her chair, her face a mask of shock and anger. The producers in the control room were in full panic mode. They cut to a commercial break as quickly as they could, desperate to give everyone a moment to regroup. But the damage was done. The entire confrontation had been broadcast live to millions of viewers. During the break, Lorraine sat in silence, staring at her hands. Sarah and David didn't dare speak to her. The crew moved around the set quietly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. One of the producers, a woman named Claire, approached Lorraine cautiously. "Lorraine, are you okay?" Lorraine looked up, her eyes blazing. "Of course I'm not okay. Did you see what he just did? He walked out on me, on my show, in front of everyone." Claire hesitated. "Lorraine, with all due respect, you were pretty harsh with him. Maybe he had a point." Lorraine's face turned red. "Don't you start. I was doing my job. I was asking tough questions. That's what people expect from me." Claire nodded slowly, clearly not wanting to argue. "Right, of course. I think we should maybe address it when we come back on air. Acknowledge what happened." Lorraine waved a hand dismissively. "Fine. Whatever. Just get me through the rest of this show." When the show came back from commercial, Lorraine was composed again, her mask firmly back in place. She smiled at the camera, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Well, that was certainly unexpected," she said, her voice light and airy. "Graham Norton has left the building, as they say, but the show must go on, right?" The audience clapped weakly, clearly unsure of how to respond. Lorraine powered through the rest of the show, chatting with the remaining panelists about lighter topics, pretending like nothing had happened. But everyone could feel the tension. The atmosphere was thick with it. Sarah tried to participate, but her voice was shaky. David kept his answers short and simple, clearly wanting to avoid any further conflict. Lorraine, for her part, was all smiles and laughs, but there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. When the show finally ended, the audience filed out in silence. There was none of the usual chatter, none of the excited energy that typically followed a taping. People just wanted to leave, to process what they'd witnessed. One woman in the front row turned to her friend as they walked out. "I cannot believe what we just saw. That was brutal." Her friend nodded, still looking shocked. "I feel so bad for Graham. He seemed genuinely hurt. And those things she said, they were just nasty. And did you see how she treated Sarah? That poor girl looked terrified. I would never want to work for someone like that." "Me neither. I used to really like Lorraine, you know. I thought she was sweet and genuine. But after today, I don't know. That was a whole different person up there." Similar conversations were happening all around the studio. The audience members were shocked, disappointed, and confused. This wasn't the Lorraine Kelly they thought they knew. Backstage, Lorraine retreated to her dressing room, slamming the door behind her. She looked at herself in the mirror, her carefully applied makeup still perfect, her hair still neatly styled, but her eyes were wild, her expression twisted with anger and something else, something that looked a lot like fear. There was a knock on the door. "Lorraine? It's Claire. Can I come in?" Lorraine didn't answer right away. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "Yes, come in." Claire entered cautiously, closing the door behind her. "Lorraine, we need to talk about what just happened." Lorraine spun around, her voice sharp. "What about it? Graham Norton threw a tantrum and walked off my show. That's on him, not me." Claire hesitated. "Lorraine, I watched the whole thing. And you were really harsh with him. You said some things that were, well, quite cruel." "Cruel?" I was being honest. I was asking him real questions, not just lobbing softballs like every other interviewer does. That's what makes me different. That's what makes this show special." Claire shook her head. "There's a difference between tough questions and personal attacks. You told him his work was meaningless. You told him anyone could do his job. You called him a placeholder. Those aren't questions, Lorraine. Those are insults." Lorraine's jaw clenched. He's been coasting for years. Someone needed to say it. But why? Why did it need to be you? And why today, on live television, with no warning? "Lorraine, this is going to blow up. It already is. My phone has been ringing nonstop since he walked out." Lorraine turned back to the mirror, avoiding Claire's eyes. "Then let it blow up. People love drama. This will be good for ratings." "No, Lorraine, this isn't the kind of drama that helps. This makes you look like a bully, and it makes Graham look like the victim. Which, honestly, he was." Lorraine slammed her hand on the vanity table, making the makeup bottles rattle. "I am not a bully. Don't you dare call me that." Claire took a step back, startled by the outburst. "I'm just trying to help you see how this looks from the outside. People are angry, Lorraine. They're disappointed. They expected better from you." "Well, maybe their expectations are the problem, not me." Claire sighed. "Lorraine, please, just think about this. Think about what you did and how it affected everyone. Not just Graham, but Sarah, David, the crew, the audience, everyone." Lorraine didn't respond. She just stared at her reflection, her face hard and unreadable. Claire waited for a moment, then turned to leave. "I'll be in my office if you want to talk. But Lorraine, you need to figure out how you're going to handle this. Because it's not going away." The door closed softly behind her, leaving Lorraine alone once again. She sat down heavily in her chair, the weight of the day finally catching up with her. She'd wanted to make a statement, to prove that she was more than just a friendly face on morning television. But instead, she'd alienated a colleague, upset her team, and shocked her audience. And the worst part? She still didn't think she'd done anything wrong. She'd gone too far. She knew it. But she'd never admit it. Not to Graham, not to her team, not even to herself. Meanwhile, Graham was already in his car, heading home. He felt drained, exhausted by the whole ordeal. But he also felt a sense of relief. He'd stood up for himself. He'd walked away when he needed to. And that, he thought, was worth something. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out at a red light and saw a text from his agent. "Just watched the show. Are you okay? Call me when you can." Graham typed back quickly. "I'm fine. Just shocked. We'll call you later." More texts came flooding in. Friends, colleagues, even people he hadn't spoken to in years. All of them were reaching out, expressing support, sharing their disbelief at what Lorraine had done. One message stood out. It was from an old friend, another television presenter. "Graham, I am so sorry you went through that. What she did was completely out of line. You handled it with such grace. Proud of you." Graham felt tears prick his eyes. He'd been holding it together, staying strong, but the kindness in that message broke something loose. He pulled over to the side of the road and let himself cry, just for a moment. Not because he was weak, but because he was human. He pulled out his phone and saw dozens of messages from friends and colleagues, all expressing their support and disbelief at what had happened. He didn't respond to any of them. He just stared out the window, watching the city blur past. Back at the studio, Sarah and David had retreated to the green room. They sat in uncomfortable silence, neither of them knowing what to say. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't believe she did that." David nodded slowly. "I've worked with Lorraine for 3 years. I've seen her be tough. I've seen her be direct, but I've never seen her be cruel like that. It was like she was a different person. And the way she talked to us when we tried to defend him. She basically told us to shut up and stay in our lane." David sighed. "I know. That was hard to take." Back at the studio, the crew was packing up. They moved quietly, efficiently, trying not to talk about what had just happened. But it was impossible not to. The confrontation was all anyone could think about. "I can't believe she did that," one of the camera operators whispered to his colleague. "I've never seen anything like it." His colleague nodded. "Graham handled it well, though. He didn't lose his cool. He left." "Yeah, I respect that. I don't know if I could have done the same." A sound technician joined the conversation, keeping her voice low. "I've worked on this show for 5 years. I've seen Lorraine have bad days, but nothing like this. She was vicious." The first camera operator glanced toward Lorraine's dressing room. "Do you think she even realizes what she's done? I mean, this is going to be everywhere. Social media, news outlets, everywhere." The sound technician shook her head. "I don't think she cares. Or if she does, she's too proud to admit it. You saw how she reacted when Claire tried to talk to her. She's in complete denial. This is going to change things around here," the second camera operator said. "People are going to look at her differently now. We all are." "Already do," the sound technician muttered. "So I used to think she was one of the good ones. Guess I was wrong." In the control room, the producers were already strategizing. How would they handle the fallout? What would they say to the press? How could they spin this in a way that didn't make Lorraine look like the villain? One producer, a man named Norton, rubbed his temples. "This is a nightmare. An absolute nightmare. We're going to have journalists calling nonstop. We need a statement ready." In the control room, the producers were already strategizing. How would they handle the fallout? What would they say to the press? How could they spin this in a way that didn't make Lorraine look like the villain? But deep down, they all knew the truth. Lorraine had crossed a line, and no amount of PR could change that. As the day wore on, the incident began to spread. The clips of the confrontation were already making the rounds on social media. People were shocked, outraged, and fascinated. This was the kind of drama that people couldn't look away from. And at the center of it all was Lorraine Kelly, sitting in her dressing room, alone with her thoughts. She'd wanted to make a statement, to show that she wasn't afraid to ask tough questions. But instead, she'd revealed something far more damaging. She'd shown the world her true colors. And there was no taking that back. The confrontation had lasted less than 15 minutes. but the impact would be felt for much longer. Graham Norton, the beloved entertainer, had walked out of Lorraine Kelly's show, and nothing would ever be the same. In those 49 seconds that changed everything, Lorraine had made a choice. She'd chosen cruelty over kindness. She'd chosen ego over empathy. And now she would have to live with the consequences of that choice for a very long time.